They said it was a conspiracy. Warren Commission said Oswald acted alone. You have two government official records saying the exact opposite, but they were both compromised because they were CIA agents in charge of the gatekeeper of information.
Parkland Hospital, there has been a shooting. Parkland Hospital has been advised to stand by for a severe gunshot wound.
That's an unconfirmed report that the president was hit in the head. The president's wife, Jackie Kennedy, was not hurt. She walked into the hospital at her husband's stretcher side.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
For over 6 decades, the truth behind JFK's assassination has remained one of the biggest mysteries in American history. The official reports told us one version of events, but gaps, contradictions, and lingering doubts have fueled endless debates and conspiracy theories. Now, new revelations have surfaced, ones that could drastically alter our understanding of what happened. The details are unsettling, the implications are massive, and the truth may be far more disturbing than anyone ever imagined. What happened in Dallas that day? And why has the full story remained hidden for so long? The pieces of this puzzle are finally coming together, but the answers raise more concerns than they resolve. The truth is emerging and it isn't good. Stay tuned. Unraveling JFK's assassination. More than 60 years have passed, yet the mystery of John F. Kennedy's assassination still grips the nation, and for good reason. Strange and puzzling details continue to leave many questioning what truly took place in Dallas on that fateful day in 1963. The slaying of President John F. Kennedy was a moment that deeply shook the United States. Now, 6 decades later, filmmaker Rob Reiner says he has finally unraveled one of the most disputed events in American history. In a 10-part podcast series, Who Killed JFK, co-hosted by journalist Soledad O'Brien, Reiner claims he will reveal the names of 4 people who were allegedly involved in this shocking crime. For Rob Reiner, this is not just a project, it's something deeply personal. He clearly recalls the moment the shocking news spread. While attending high school, he saw a classmate lean in and whisper to the teacher. Shortly after, Reiner and his classmates were sent home. Like countless Americans, he spent the next several days glued to the television. What unfolded was almost unreal, including the live broadcast of Lee Harvey Oswald, the man accused of slaying President Kennedy, being shot by Jack Ruby. That experience stayed with him, sparking a lifelong need to find answers. His search for the truth brought him to Dealey Plaza in Dallas, the place where it all happened. Over the years, he visited the site many times, speaking with forensic specialists, witnesses, and others linked to the case. His podcast is the result of years of research, aiming to give the clearest picture yet of what really took place that day. His findings directly challenge the long-accepted lone gunman theory from the Warren Commission. Instead, Reiner believes there was a plot involving rogue CIA agents, Cuban exile groups, and members of organized crime. He suggests these forces worked together in a carefully planned effort to assassinate the president. Using advanced forensic techniques, newly released records, and clearer video from Dealey Plaza, Reiner and his team bring fresh insight into the case. The findings include statements from doctors at Parkland Hospital who cared for Kennedy and described entry wounds that do not match gunfire from the Texas Schoolbook Depository. Other witness accounts and documents uncover links between Oswald and intelligence agents, adding more uncertainty about his true involvement. What Paul Landis remembers. Paul Landis, an 88-year-old former Secret Service agent who was just feet away from President Kennedy when he was shot, shares a startling revelation in his new memoir. He states that after the shooting, he removed a bullet from the presidential car and later placed it on Kennedy's stretcher at the hospital. At first glance, this may seem like a small detail in a case that has been scrutinized for over half a century. However, for those who have spent decades analyzing every piece of evidence, Landis's account is a major and unexpected twist. Debates have long raged over how many shooters were involved, who orchestrated the attack, and how many bullets struck Kennedy. The belief that the real story differs from the official account has fueled America's longest-running conspiracy theory. Some historians even argue that this event triggered the nation's growing distrust in its government. Landis's claim has the potential to either confirm or upend what people believe about the assassination. His book, The Final Witness, adds more fuel to the ongoing obsession with uncovering the full truth. This is really the most significant news in the assassination since 1963, said historian and Kennedy expert James Robinault, who worked closely with Landis to prepare him for making his account public. On that tragic day, 28-year-old Landis was assigned to protect Jackie Kennedy. He saw the fatal shot to the president's head up close, followed by absolute chaos. What he did next remained a secret for decades, known only to a few close confidants. In an interview with the New York Times, Landis recalled that when the motorcade reached the hospital, he noticed a bullet resting in the back of the presidential limousine, near the spot where Kennedy had been sitting. He picked it up and put it in his pocket. Moments later, he found himself in the emergency room with Kennedy. Wanting to ensure the bullet stayed with the body, he placed it on the president's stretcher. There was nobody there to secure the scene, and that was a big bother to me, Landis told the Times. This was all going on so quickly, and I was just afraid that it was a piece of evidence that I realized right away, he continued. Very important, and I didn't want it to disappear or get lost. Despite filing reports in the days following the assassination, Landis never officially documented this specific act, nor was he interviewed by the Warren Commission. He was totally sleep-deprived and was still required to work and was suffering from severe PTSD, Robinault told the BBC. He forgot about the bullet, he added. Having spent extensive time interviewing Landis, Robinault recently wrote a Vanity Fair article analyzing this new revelation. He was totally absorbed in the enormous stuff that was going on, Robinault continued. For years, Landis distanced himself from the assassination and the endless conspiracy theories it inspired. But now, after decades of silence, he has decided it is time to share his story with the world. Now let's break down the lone gunman theory step by step and examine the evidence that has kept the public questioning for decades. Lone gunman theory. The Warren Commission's official report concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, firing 3 shots from the Texas School Book Depository. This explanation, known as the lone gunman theory, seems simple, yet it has sparked debates that have lasted for decades. To understand this theory better, let's examine the evidence linking Oswald to the crime. Oswald was employed at the Texas School Book Depository, a building located along the path of Kennedy's motorcade. According to the commission, he brought a rifle to work that day, concealing it inside a long paper bag. Witnesses reported seeing him carrying the bag, and later, investigators recovered a rifle from the 6th floor of the building. This weapon, a Mannlicher Carcano rifle, was connected to Oswald through purchase records and fingerprints. However, the biggest point of contention is the mechanics of the shooting itself. The Warren Commission stated that Oswald fired 3 shots. The first was missed entirely. The second struck both President Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally. The third was the fatal shot. The second shot, often called the magic bullet, is one of the most debated aspects of the case. It supposedly entered Kennedy's upper back, exited through his throat, and then hit Connally, injuring his chest, wrist, and thigh. Many skeptics argue that this bullet's path defies the laws of physics, making it unlikely that a single round could have caused all of these injuries. Now take a moment to consider what this means. Could one person, using a rifle from several floors above street level, really pull off such a precise series of shots? The Warren Commission believed it was possible. They pointed to controlled tests where trained shooters were able to recreate the shots. However, critics argue that Oswald was not an expert marksman. His military records describe him as a mediocre shooter at best, casting doubt on whether he had the skill to fire so quickly and accurately under such intense conditions. Oswald's mysterious motive. Another important part of this theory is Oswald's reason for acting, or the possibility that he had none at all. Oswald had served in the Marine Corps before defecting to the Soviet Union, only to later return to the United States. His behavior points to someone with extreme beliefs, yet the Warren Commission was unable to determine a definite motive for why he would choose to assassinate President Kennedy. Oswald insisted he had nothing to do with the assassination after his arrest, but just 2 days later, he was gunned down by nightclub owner Jack Ruby while in police custody. His sudden death meant there would be no trial, no further questioning, and no way to fully understand his true intentions. The lone gunman theory is built on the idea that Oswald acted entirely on his own. However, lingering doubts continue to challenge this conclusion. For instance, how did Oswald manage to escape detection immediately after the shots were fired? Witnesses placed him inside the building shortly before the motorcade passed, yet he somehow slipped away, took a bus and then a taxi, and later shot and slain Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit. These events suggest a man following a plan, yet there is no solid proof connecting him to a larger plot, leaving many unconvinced. Consider what this theory has meant for public trust in the government. The Warren Commission sought to bring closure by pinning the crime on a lone assassin. But for many, this explanation seems too convenient. How could one person acting alone so profoundly alter the course of history? The gaps in evidence and conflicting details have kept doubts alive, allowing alternative theories to thrive. Multiple shooters theory. Now let's explore an alternative explanation that has fascinated millions. The theory that John F. Kennedy's assassination was the result of a coordinated plot involving multiple gunmen. Unlike the lone gunman theory, this view argues that Lee Harvey Oswald was not the only shooter, or possibly wasn't involved at all. Instead, it suggests that powerful groups worked together to carry out the slaying. A key piece of evidence often cited in support of this idea is the Zapruder film, a home recording that captured the assassination as it happened. Those who have seen the footage describe it as haunting. The film shows Kennedy being struck, but for many, it also raises doubts about the official version of events, particularly regarding the direction of the gunfire. The Warren Commission stated that all shots came from the Texas School Book Depository, positioned behind the president's vehicle. However, the fatal shot appears to force Kennedy backward, leading some to believe the bullet came from the front, possibly from the grassy knoll, a small hill near Dealey Plaza. Eyewitness accounts also support this theory. Many people on the scene reported hearing gunfire from the direction of the grassy knoll. Some even claimed they saw smoke or a figure in that area. Though police quickly searched the knoll after the shooting, they found no concrete proof of a second shooter. Still, the belief that another gunman was positioned there remains one of the most persistent elements of the conspiracy theory. Now, let's step back and think about what this means. If there were multiple shooters, who planned the attack? Some theories point to the CIA, arguing that Kennedy's handling of Cold War tensions and his plans to pull back U.S. involvement in Vietnam made him a threat to certain interests. Others suggest the Mafia played a role, given that the Kennedy administration had aggressively pursued organized crime. Another possibility is that both groups, along with others who had their own reasons, worked together to carry out the assassination. What evidence exists to support these claims? That's the next question to explore. Cover-ups and conspiracies. One curious detail in the case is the man known as Umbrella Man. In multiple photos and videos taken during the assassination, a man is seen holding an open umbrella, even though the weather is clear and sunny. Some believe he was signaling the gunman, or possibly using a weapon disguised as an umbrella. While this theory may seem unlikely, it highlights just how closely every aspect of this event has been examined. Another major argument supporting the idea of a conspiracy is how the investigation was handled. Critics of the Warren Commission claim that crucial witnesses were either ignored or silenced, key evidence was not properly preserved, and alternative explanations were dismissed without fair consideration. For example, some individuals who initially said they heard gunfire from the grassy knoll later changed their statements, possibly due to outside pressure. These inconsistencies have led many to suspect that evidence was intentionally suppressed. The idea of a conspiracy is also tied to a deeper mistrust of government institutions. The assassination occurred at the height of the Cold War, a time when fears of espionage and internal threats were widespread. The belief that Kennedy's death was not the result of a lone gunman, but instead part of a larger plot fits into a broader pattern of suspicion surrounding hidden influences and covert operations. Whether the suspects include the CIA, organized crime figures, or another powerful group, the theory of a planned conspiracy offers an explanation that seems more fitting for such a monumental event. But let's stop and think for a moment. What would it actually take to execute a plan of this scale? It would require careful coordination, multiple participants, and the ability to control or discredit anyone who might reveal the truth. Could such a cover-up be possible? Yes. But is it realistic? That question continues to divide people. As we conclude this discussion, consider what this theory truly represents. For many, the belief in a conspiracy is not just about the facts. It is about the sense that the official explanation doesn't fully make sense. It is about the lingering doubts that refuse to fade, even decades later. And it is about the unsettling possibility that powerful forces might have played a role in shaping history in ways the public still does not fully understand. CIA theory. The third theory about JFK's assassination is one of the most debated, and it involves one of the most powerful agencies in the United States, the Central Intelligence Agency. This theory suggests that the CIA was behind Kennedy's slaying, driven by growing tensions between the president and the agency. To understand why this idea has lasted for so long, we need to look at Kennedy's history with the CIA. His distrust of the agency was well known, especially after the failed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961. The disastrous attempt to remove Fidel Castro from power was a major embarrassment for Kennedy. While he publicly took responsibility, behind closed doors, he blamed the CIA for misleading him about the operation's chances of success. In the wake of this failure, Kennedy reportedly vowed to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. Statements like this may have made him a direct threat to the agency's leadership. Supporters of the CIA theory argue that Kennedy's foreign policy choices further deepened the divide between him and the intelligence community. His attempt to open secret negotiations with Cuba in hopes of improving relations was seen by some within the CIA as an act of betrayal. Many hardliners in the agency were determined to remove Castro from power at any cost. Another source of conflict was Kennedy's plan to pull U.S. troops out of Vietnam. This decision, outlined in National Security Action Memorandum 263, ran against the CYA's preferred strategy, which favored expanding American military involvement in Southeast Asia. To some within the agency, Kennedy's approach to foreign policy may have made him a serious obstacle to their goals. Now, let's examine some of the evidence often cited in support of this theory. One of the most significant claims is that CIA operatives were present in Dallas on the day of the assassination. Hidden agendas and unanswered questions. Howard Hunt, a former CIA officer who was later linked to the Watergate scandal, was reportedly in Dallas on the day of the assassination. Though he denied any involvement in Kennedy's death, some researchers believe his presence adds weight to suspicions about CIA ties to the event. Another claim suggests that George H.W. Bush, who later became president and had ties to the CIA at the time, was also in Dallas that day. While these claims remain unproven, they contribute to the belief that the agency may have played a role in what happened on November 22, 1963. Another piece of evidence comes from Richard Case Nagell, a former CIA operative. Nagell stated that he was given orders to eliminate Lee Harvey Oswald before Oswald could carry out the assassination. According to Nagell, instead of following through with the mission, he intentionally got himself arrested in El Paso, Texas, to distance himself from the unfolding plot. Though his story remains unverified, it adds yet another layer of intrigue to the theory of CIA involvement. Then there's James Jesus Angleton, the CIA's counterintelligence chief. Known for his extreme secrecy and control over intelligence operations, Angleton has been accused by some researchers of interfering with investigations into Kennedy's assassination. They argued that he played a key role in keeping any evidence of CIA involvement hidden. One example of this suppression is the agency's failure to provide the Warren Commission with important information about Oswald's activities before the assassination. Records show that Oswald had traveled to Mexico City and reportedly visited the Cuban and Soviet embassies. The CIA's withholding of these details has led many to question whether the agency was covering up a deeper connection between Oswald and intelligence operations. Now, let's take a step back and consider what this theory would mean if true. If the CIA was involved in Kennedy's assassination, it would suggest an extraordinary act of betrayal at the highest level of government. Could an agency meant to protect national security have turned against the President of the United States? Skeptics of the CIA theory argue that such a large and complex conspiracy would have been impossible to keep hidden for so many years. They point out that if the agency had played a role, someone would have come forward with undeniable proof by now. However, supporters of this theory counter that secrecy is precisely what the CIA excels at. The agency has carried out countless covert operations beyond public view, making it possible that a small, rogue group within its ranks could have been responsible without the knowledge of top officials. Adding to the suspicion is the fact that many CIA records related to the assassination remain classified, even decades later. The government's unwillingness to release all documents only raises more questions. What is still being kept secret? Why hasn't everything been made public? Finally, it's important to look at the cultural backdrop that fuels this theory. During the 1960s, trust in government institutions was already beginning to crumble. This distrust only grew in the years that followed, especially after scandals like Watergate and revelations of CIA misconduct. The idea that the agency could have played a role in Kennedy's death fits into a broader pattern of suspicion about hidden power and government cover-ups. Mafia Theory. The fourth theory focuses on the idea that organized crime, specifically the Mafia, played a major role in JFK's assassination. According to this theory, President Kennedy's aggressive stance against the Mafia, led by his brother and Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, angered powerful mob figures who wanted revenge. To understand why this theory has gained support, let's take a closer look at the connections between the Kennedy family and the criminal underworld. The Kennedys had ties to the Mafia in both personal and political circles. During the 1960 presidential election, it was widely rumored that influential mob leaders, including Sam Giancana and Carlos Marcello, helped secure key votes for Kennedy in states like Illinois and West Virginia. However, once Kennedy was elected, his administration took a hard stance against organized crime, launching some of the most aggressive crackdowns in history. Robert F. Kennedy went after major mafia figures such as Giancana, Meyer Lansky, and Santo Trafficante Jr. This aggressive campaign put a strain on the relationship between the Kennedys and their former backers in the criminal world. Supporters of the Mafia theory argue that these actions made President Kennedy a target. New Orleans Mafia boss Carlos Marcello was particularly vocal in his anger toward the administration. He reportedly once said that the best way to stop Robert Kennedy was to cut off the head, implying that eliminating the president would remove the threat posed by his Attorney General brother. Marcello's resentment was intensified by his deportation to Guatemala in 1961, a move orchestrated by Robert Kennedy. Though Marcello later made his way back to the United States, the experience was a deep personal and professional insult. Now let's examine some of the evidence linking the Mafia to the assassination. One of the most notable figures in this theory is Jack Ruby, the Dallas nightclub owner who shot and slain Lee Harvey Oswald just 2 days after Kennedy's assassination. The Mafia's hidden hand. Ruby had well-documented ties to organized crime, leading to speculation that his real motive was to silence Oswald before he could expose a larger conspiracy. While Ruby insisted that he acted out of patriotism and grief, many remained skeptical of this explanation. Another key factor in this theory is Oswald's own possible connections to the Mafia. Though he was not a known member of any crime syndicate, he spent time in places linked to organized crime and was acquainted with individuals who had direct ties to the underworld. One such connection was David Ferry, a pilot with links to Carlos Marcello. Ferry and Oswald reportedly crossed paths through their involvement with anti-Castro groups in New Orleans. Then there is the question of motive. From the Mafia's perspective, Kennedy's assassination accomplished several objectives. It removed a president whose administration was aggressively targeting organized crime and served as a warning to other political figures about the consequences of challenging the mob's influence. Some theories go even further, suggesting that the Mafia worked alongside certain factions of the CIA to carry out the assassination. The idea is that both groups had reasons to oppose Kennedy's policies and saw mutual benefit in his removal. However, as with any theory, there are still many unresolved questions. Could the Mafia have successfully carried out such a highly coordinated assassination without leaving behind undeniable proof? And why would they take such a major risk, knowing it could bring even more law enforcement attention to their activities? Skeptics argue that while the Mafia may have had a strong reason to act, the level of planning and precision required suggests a more sophisticated operation than they were capable of pulling off alone. Even with these doubts, the Mafia theory remains one of the most compelling explanations for what happened. It ties together key elements of the case, demonstrating how political conflicts, criminal influence, and personal grudges can collide in ways that shape history. That's it for today's video. But now we want to hear from you. Do you think the truth about JFK's assassination has finally been uncovered, or are there still pieces missing? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history's biggest mysteries. And before you go, check out one of the 2 videos on your screen. You won't want to miss what we uncover next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.